So now who am I? Uh, so my name is Amanda Rotondo. I am not a historian at all. I worked for 25 years in consulting, doing research for software companies. I have a PhD in human computer interaction. What does that have to do with anything? I don't know. Um, the one connection is that I worked with people. I researched how people interact with computers. And that ended up lending itself so beautifully to this work because history is about people, right? We get caught up in concepts like war and law and all this, but in the end, it's all just people. So that worked out better than I planned. So let me tell you a little bit about the book. It is called Place Names in Boston and Beyond, Tongue Twisted Town Tales. And it is, how I describe it is it's a collection of untold and undertold stories from towns with hard to pronounce names, which is a weird premise, right? Like, how did you land on that? So it started out with me and my friend laughing about how ridiculous it is to try to pronounce Massachusetts town names. And we decided it would be fun to put together a little like gift book, right? Like, here, I'll show you. Oh, hold on. Like this. This is Waltham. So, hello, my name is Wolf. I am learning English in Waltham and I'm having trouble understanding some verb forms. Why is the proper English I am slash Wolf is instead of I am slash Wolf am? So I put together a whole bunch of these goofy, completely goofy little cartoons and sayings to help people understand how to say these town names. And there are about 40 of them. And so I, sent it off to a couple publishers and thought, what do you think about this? And to my surprise, somebody got back to me. And I got on the phone with him and he was really excited. He said, this is so much fun. Yeah, we're thinking like 35,000 words. And I was like, I think I have 200. What are these other 34,900 or 800 words about? So he wanted to use the cartoons to talk about sort of a jumping off point to talk about how these towns got their name, and a little bit of the history of them getting established. Cool, I can do that. So as I started doing this, I figured out there are 4 ways that towns in Massachusetts got their names. They're named after a person. It's a Native American word. They're named after a town in England, or it's something directional about where they relate to somebody else. It was so boring. I was sitting in the library and I thought to myself, I cannot write this book. And have you all seen Gone with the Wind? You know where Scarlett O'Hara is in the gardens of Tara and she shakes her fist. She says, as God is my witness, I will never be hungry again. That was me in the library. Like, I will not write a boring book. So in the spirit of asking forgiveness rather than permission, I just completely switched it up and started pulling at the sweater thread of anything interesting I could find about these towns. And stories tumbled out of everywhere. The most wonderful people came forward and wanted to talk about these crazy things in their town. And I would look at a signpost and say, why is that street that name? And look into it further. And it just kind of goes to show that we live in a place that is just saturated with amazing stories. So I had a ton of fun pulling them out. And in the book, I didn't only write the stories, but I wrote about discovering them because I thought that was part of the fun, right? Um, and I sort of tried to make it mine. Again, publisher had no idea I was doing. Um, so, for example, the chapters in the book are ordered not alphabetically by town, but by Dunkin' Donuts per capita, with the highest Dunkin' Donuts per capita being first and going through. And one other thing that happened during this process was I asked the editor, so how does how long do people take to write a book like this? Trying to pretend I know what I'm doing. And he said, oh, about 6 months. So I get a few months in and I'm like, how do people do this in 6 months? What I realized is most people who write a history book have a whole knowledge of history, then decide they're going to write it down. And that takes about 6 months. I thought Gloucester was a funny word. And then I wrote a book about it. So it should have taken me a lot longer than 6 months, but we got it done. So, I don't presume to tell you all much about Waltham history. I live in Reading. I've lived in Massachusetts 25 years, love it. But I'm not going to stand here and talk to you guys about the Waltham Watch Factory because you should be standing here talking to me about it. But there are two stories that came out of Waltham that I really enjoyed. One is about the watch company, and um, I'm sure you all know about the recent sale of the John Astor watch. No, so John Astor, we all know Astor family bazillionaires in the sort of Edwardian Victorian era. So John Jacob Astor famously died on the Titanic. He put his new wife in a lifeboat, and he was last seen standing and smoking a cigar, hanging out, either not knowing what was coming or not caring. And later, after the wreck, they were, unfortunately collecting the not survivors' bodies from the water, and they collected him. And in his pocket was his gold Waltham watch, and it was inscribed with his initials, and he had it on him when he drowned, and it went to his son, and over time his son passed it on to the son of his father's secretary. So John Astor's secretary's child owned the watch, and eventually it came up for sale, and this was a few years ago. So it sold for $1.46 million. Pretty nice. Um, so that's probably, of the millions of Waltham watches out there, I assume that's the most expensive one. One of you has one that's worth more, let's talk. Um, but one thing that surprised me beyond just the sheer volume of watches produced in Waltham was something else about sort of the Industrial Revolution in general. Let me get to my page here. So I don't want to like read at you because that's no fun. So I'm going to talk to you about these stories and then just read little snippets if that's okay. Um, so Waltham is known as the Watch City, and the moniker is hardly a stretch. Between 1850 and 1957, the Waltham Watch Company produced over 40 million watches. Prior to then, watchmaking had been a cottage industry with individual watchmakers plying their trade in small workshops. The Industrial Revolution of the mid-19th century brought many cottage industries into factory settings, and watchmaking was among them. One of the linchpins of industrialization was the creation of interchangeable parts. Waltham Watch Company was the first to create the machinery to produce interchangeable parts for watches, speeding up production and driving down costs. And it's fascinating to me. So not only did they produce the watches, but of course they had to create the machines to make parts, right? Because if the parts they had to be interchangeable, they had to be the same, right? And it would be very hard to have artisans pounding out watch pins and have them all be identical. So I thought that was really neat. Not only is the watch company, not only should it be known for its products, but what it gave to industry in general in the form of creation of the machinery for interchangeable parts. I thought that was really cool. That's John Astor's watch. Don't stare directly at it. It'll burn your eyes out. All right. So another Waltham story that I really loved. I was a child of Sesame Street myself. The gentleman pictured is Carroll Spinney, and he was born in Waltham in 1933, and he was Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch, which is incredible. So he was born in Waltham, and as a child, he loved puppets. He played with puppets all the time. Makes sense, right? So he graduated high school and went into the Air Force, and he dabbled a little bit in TV and some cartoons and all that. In 1960, he got out of the Air Force, and this is the story of him meeting Jim Henson, which I just love this. It really speaks to who Jim Henson was. In 1960, now out of the Air Force, Spinney got back on television on The Bozo Show. He also did puppet shows. At the 1969 Puppeteers of America Festival, Spinney has had a disastrous show. In the go big or go home dichotomy, Spinney had gone the go big route and nothing went right. Jim Henson was in the audience and saw that Spinney's crash and burn was due to his trying ambitious experimental techniques. After the show, Henson approached Spinney and said, "I like what you were trying to do." In an NPR interview in 2003, Spinney recalled, he said, "Why don't you come down to New York and talk about the Muppets? I have some characters I want to build. One is a tall, funny-looking bird, and the other is going to be this grouchy character who's going to live in a pile of trash in the gutter." Maybe Henson's pitch wasn't so suave, but Spinney went for it. So up until Sesame Street, kids shows, there was no educational value. It was, people hitting each other in the face with pies and all that. So Sesame Street was really the first one to deal with education. And in 1971, there was a study done that showed that children who watched Sesame Street started school farther ahead than children who didn't. So there was actually a measurable impact from the show that Carol Spinney and Jim Henson created, which is really amazing. And another thing many of us know Sesame Street for, in addition to ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, is how they tackled, or still do, emotions and feelings and sort of the interpersonal difficulties of childhood. And so this is another brief excerpt. In 1983, Henson, Spinney, and the rest of the humans behind Sesame Street faced the question of how far to take that tackling of emotional issues. Will Lee, who played the much-loved character Mr. Hooper, died of cancer. Spinney recalled to The New Yorker, "We didn't know what to do. We thought perhaps he could just retire, move to Florida or something. But then the producers thought that the best thing to do would be to actually deal with death. And in the memorable scene, Big Bird learns that when people die, they never come back. We were all in tears by the end of the scene, and they were totally genuine." So this was remarkable because for a children's program to talk about death in a straight on way was unheard of. But they kept, they sort of kept that up with talking about emotions and being honest. And that resonated so much with kids because kids know when you're lying to them, much to my chagrin because I have 3 and I wish they believed me. So those are the 2 stories that I found about Waltham that I thought were really fascinating and that I wish I had known, and I'm glad I know now. So I know this is the Waltham Historical Society, but I was thinking maybe I would tell you some stories about other towns too. Is that all right? All right. Let me see how I'm doing on time. Good. Okay. So let's see. This is a ship, but it's not. It's a house. So did somebody just say Sailor Tom? Did I hear somebody say Sailor Tom? I thought I heard it. Oh, I'm hearing things. Creepy. Okay. So this is in Reading. It's not anymore. It was torn down in around the year 2000. But so the story behind the ship, I can't stop giggling whenever I talk about it. It's the best. In 1935, this guy named Sailor Tom built a tiny restaurant on Route 28. So before the highways, people would take 28 to go up to New Hampshire, Maine, etc. So there were all these little roadside attractions for the people that were going up there. I know anybody has seen the animated movie Cars, like the Radiator Springs and all that. When the interstate highway came and diverted all that traffic, all these little amusements sort of closed and dried up. But in 1935, Sailor Tom and his tiny restaurant were doing great. Business was booming. He expanded, he made his restaurant bigger, and he added a pond where you could catch your own trout and they would cook it for you. He added a miniature New England fishing village you could go walk around. He added animals. There was like a mini zoo. He took a PT boat and he turned it into a gift shop. Now, mind you, this is Reading. There's beach. Decidedly sea-themed amusement park in the middle of a landlocked town. And I ended up speaking to a gentleman he was 80 when I spoke to him, and he remembered going to Sailor Tom's as a kid. He grew up in Winchester, and I was able to talk to him on the phone, and he the way he described it, just you could just feel the glow coming off his face. This was such a treasured childhood memory for him. And so he and I talked, and then the the amusement area closed in 1955, and Sailor Tom lived in this. This is a ship, but it's on a concrete foundation, and it is the most confusing thing I've ever seen in my life. So this was his house, and it was at the top of the hill, and then the whole amusement park sort of spread out below it. So it just looks like somebody accidentally dropped a boat in the middle of a field. The strangest thing. And it's got this big anchor you can see coming down the side. So this was here until he left it in 1961, but it existed until 1999. Re-enter Foley Foley, the guy I talked to who remembered going there as a kid. So he, in the 90s, was resident of Reading with two kids, and he and his wife were getting divorced. He needed a place to live. So he always knew the ship was there, and he knew some guy had just bought it. So he found the guy and said, "Hey, do you need somebody to watch it for you?" The guy was like, "Sure." So he moved in. So, so this gentleman lived in the ship house for 3 or 4 years with his kids, and I got to talk to all of them. And I mean, you want to talk about having a blast. They had a blast on this ship. And I'll read to you a little bit about it. Let's see, let me get there. Okay, so Coley Foley is the name of the man that was the 80-year-old. He also has a son named Coley Foley, who also has a son named Coley Foley. You see where this is going. Um, so uh, so in the book, I'm talking about Mr. Foley having these wonderful memories, and then his daughter Kelly's memory is slightly different. It was November of 1991, Healy recalled, the night before Thanksgiving, and I asked if I could have a few friends over. Of course, there were no cell phones. It was all word of mouth. Before I knew it, the entire town of Reading, anyone from the late 80s Reading High classes on, tons of people showed up. Things got a little out of hand. There was no phone on the ship, so I had to run somewhere and call the cops to break up the party. It was the talk of the town. I was in a bad place because my friends were throwing my dad's records off the deck, Healy recalled. Foley laughed, recalling the event. I think I said it's all right. We'll pick them up tomorrow. I took this opportunity to inform them that my father would have reacted very differently. That Healy was lucky to have such a cool dad. Yeah, he's always been great, she replied. So, they told me about all these memories of sunbathing on the deck as the cars went by. And there was a big hurricane, and there was a tree that fell near the ship. It was very obvious that this tree had fallen. So the younger Coley Foley, who was like 14 at the time, he and his dad took red high C mix and put it on a bandage and wrapped his head, and then went over to his mom's house to try to pretend like there had been an accident, like with this, in the hurricane. And the mom was like, "I know what you guys are up to. Get out of here." So this family had this amazing experience on this ship, that sort of got this second life after this amusement park. And then here they are. This is at the book launch a couple weeks ago. The gentleman in blue is the younger Coley Foley. The woman in white is Kelly Healy, and then the woman with the glasses is Coley Foley's wife. And one thing about this story that's especially meaningful to me is that uh, about a month ago, the older Mr. Foley passed away, and um, it struck me how important it is to write down these stories, because again, like I said, when he talked about it, you could feel just this glow coming from him. And at the launch party, I asked permission, of course, but at the launch party, I read part of the story, and his family were there, and they hadn't had a memorial service for him yet, and they were all absolutely in tears, but it was good crying, and it was really, it meant a lot to me that I could kind of help with this, help bring them a little bit of happiness, whatever that feeling is. But yeah, like I said, like it's just a funny family story, but it's also history. So just because it's not somebody fighting a war or somebody inventing something doesn't mean it's not important. So another story that I will talk to you about. This is St. Athanasius Church, and it was when it was built the largest hyperbolic paraboloid roof in the Western Hemisphere. That shape is a hyperbolic paraboloid known to the rest of us as a Pringle. If you look at it, it's basically a Pringle with pointy ends, right? So if you want to, impress somebody, you can eat a Pringle, and this is a delicious hyperbolic paraboloid. So this was built. The architect was named Daniel Tully. It was built in 1960, and that roof from the far points there is 155 feet, which is a staggering distance. And mind you, there's no posts inside holding this roof up. It's just like a flying roof, which really stressed me out because how does it not fall, right? So so I looked into a little bit about how the heck they made this. So in order for this roof to work, they had to do a continuous pour of concrete. It's only 3 inches thick. And so there were trucks lined up down the street, cement trucks, apparently like dozens of them, that were just going in, dumping the concrete and just cycling through. And people who were around remember this. So, of course, why did it have to be continuous, right? Why couldn't you just pour some and then let it dry? And so I spoke to a construction management friend of mine who I can't believe she agreed to do this because she knew I was going to be ridiculous, but she was on board. So my biggest concern was, is it safe to sled on? Right? I mean, don't you just want to sled on that thing? So I dragged her through this whole big interview about like, how do you keep a roof like this up? How is it, how does it stick, not puncture it? And then I got to the point, which was, can I sled on it? And she said, I mean, it's not like a jump. You would hit the ground. If there were a sledding hill like this, I'd do it, and I'm pretty risk averse. You know who else is risk averse? Structural engineers. So that said, weight isn't the biggest concern. Would I bring a group of 100 of my closest friends up there with me? No. But hypothetically, if I did, I'd encourage them to keep some space a la COVID social distancing. Roofs are rated and structurally designed to withstand a certain number of pounds per square foot. So if you spread out, you'd be in better shape. Another option is to insist that everyone lay down and only use a barrel roll to move from place to place. How fast could you go? Well, again, we look to physics. What's the surface? Is it EPDM, rubber, or shingles, ouch? And therefore, what is the coefficient of friction? How steep is the roof angle? How much does the sledder weigh? There are really a lot of variables. So I took that to mean, yes, I can sled down it. So I'm just waiting for some snow. But unfortunately, this is in Reading, I'm sorry. But unfortunately, apparently some kids beat me to it. And when they built this church, there were sledders on it. The first few winters, kids were climbing up, and I'm so jealous. And then you can't really see, but sort of on the bottom there, there's a big gate, so you can't actually get up on the roof. But so this church was built by this architect Daniel Tully, who was himself a devout Catholic, and he really overachieved. He was apparently St. Athanasius, who the church is named for, was a big proponent of the Holy Trinity. So everything in the church is done in threes, and in sort of triplicate. Tully designed not only the building, he designed all the furniture, and he designed a crucifix, which is about 40 feet tall. It stands at the far end here, the one closest to me, and it is imposing. So he designed it and had it carved in Italy and sent over. So if you want to see the largest Pringle chip in the world, it's St. Athanasius in Reading, 1960. Yeah, well, there's another point on the other side, but if you, yeah, right, exactly. But if you think about a traditional church, it's in the shape of a cross, right? You've got the long part, you come in the back here, the altar's here, And then there's the, can't remember what they're called. They're like alcoves with the little chapels on the sides. So a typical Catholic church is built in the shape of a cross. And so is this. If you follow the line from this point up to that point, and then the point here touching the ground over to the point touching the other ground, it is a cross. So, and I go into it more in the book about the details to which he went for this building, and it really is amazing. And the inside of it is even more incredible. There's stained glass everywhere. It's really beautiful. Um, so let's see. I'm about 30 minutes. Can I tell you one more? Is that okay? Quick one? All right. Um, getting to be past my bedtime. So some of the one of the other things that I really loved that I discovered while writing this were new ways to look at people that we sort of already know. One of whom was the Dunkin' Donuts guy. So I did a chapter in Quincy, for obviously the town Quincy, which is not pronounced Quincy, as you all know. And William Rosenberg was the founder of Dunkin' Donuts. And I thought I had this, this sort of romantic notion in my head that he was this poor, scrappy guy, and he, started this little coffee shop on the Circle, and he made it work. But he was already quite rich by the time he started Dunkin' Donuts, which incidentally, and you're going to wish I didn't tell you this because it's going to ruin things, was originally called Open Kettle, and he changed it to Dunkin' Donuts 2 years later. And I'm not happy that I know that. I really want it to have originally been Dunkin' Donuts. So he actually had a booming business already with canteen trucks. He invented the canteen truck, the thing that drives up to construction sites and all that. So that was actually him. He had a big business with this. He did a whole bunch of like industrial cafeteria type things. So by the time he started Dunks, he was not a scrappy little guy. He was a very established businessman. Also, once Dunkin' Donuts started going and they started franchising out, franchising had existed before, but it was not really, it wasn't really cohesive. It was sort of a, fly by the seat of your pants situation. And William Rosenberg is the one who really made franchising what it is today. So he gave us a lot more than just Dunks. He gave us canteen trucks and franchising. Thanks. And the last one I'll tell you is another person that I learned to see a little bit differently, who's one of my favorite figures in history, because he's just so human. It's John Adams. And so I have a couple. So all of John and Abigail Adams' letters to each other and journals are all online. Massachusetts Historical Society, I believe, digitized them, and you can just go read them. They're phenomenal. So there were 3 points about John Adams well, two about him and one about his wife. One is that in 1771, so things are underway, right? Like America's gelatinous, congealing, and he's writing in his journal that he learned a really great recipe for making manure. He's got this very long and detailed entry about how to like make this great fertilizer because he's a farmer, right? So very detailed, very much like he's excited about it. This is great. He's got a plan. He writes down what he's going to do with it. So that was on June 25th, 1771. On June 26th, this is the next day, he says that he had a good deal of conversation with Judge Trowbridge about the powers of the court of probate. And then he goes on about forming, the court system, et cetera. But what's hilarious is he wrote this the next day, the day he actually had the conversation with the judge about forming probate. He didn't write about that conversation. He wrote about fertilizer. It's almost like that day he was really taken by this fertilizer. And the next day he's like, oh, right, conversation. And then he records it. So I thought was so something I would do. Another one, and we sort of know this about him. If I'm sure you've all seen the mini series on him, which is wonderful. But he's makes this journal entry as he's traveling with a group of people along the Massachusetts coast. presumably for work. And he says, Tuesday, July 2nd, 1771. This has been the most flat, insipid, spiritless, tasteless journey that ever I took, especially from Ipswich. I have neither had business nor amusement nor conversation. It has been a moping, melancholy journey upon the whole. I slumber and I mope away the day. Just grouch. But like, he's so human. We've all felt like that. Um, and then the last one is actually the letters from him to Abigail and Abigail to him. So these are from early in 1764, April of 1764, and they were married in September of 1764. So this is 6 months before their wedding, and they're sending letters back and forth to each other. And of course, in this day, there's propriety and all this properness, and they are like, but they're like teenagers, right? So Abigail writes, oh, she called him Lysander. That was her nickname for him, who was, as I learned, a Spartan general. Um, so she writes, here I am, all alone in my chamber, a mere nun, I assure you. After professing myself thus, will it not be out of character to confess that my thoughts are often employed about Lysander? Out of abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh, and why not the mind thinketh? So she's basically like, oh, I'm very innocent, sitting alone here in my bedroom, just thinking about you, which I thought was so funny because you don't think about them as, kind of being flirty. Um, and then he writes back that they had been at an event together, and they were talking, and somebody came over and interrupted them, and he says uh, that um, why can I tell you we might, if we had been together, have laid into temptation. I don't mean to commit any evil unless setting upon late and thereby injuring my health may be called so. So he's basically saying, like, thank God we were interrupted, because we're not married. So I just thought that was so delightful to be able to kind of see that little window into these people that we hold up on this pedestal, but they're just people. Um, so that's all the stories we'll tell you. Does anybody have any questions?